You found why we are Christians. My name is Kent Philpott. This is the second part of our interview with Larry Gottlieb. He's in Oregon. I can't remember the name of the town, but my wife and I, Katie, we visited Larry and Cheryl at their home, and we're going to finish up the conversation with Larry. Welcome again. Larry, here we are. We're going to finish up. We got part 2 of the program, and
Okay.
we're going to have to talk about some painful things. And during our break, I asked you if you will be willing to talk about it. I want to bring up a tragic period in all of our lives, and that was a group that developed called the Children of God. And David Hoyt and I actually met them in Newport Beach at a nightclub that they had, a Christian nightclub. David became David Moses Berg and his family, and they began a group within the Jesus People movement that actually came from without it, but came involved in it. And what happened was that they swept into Atlanta and took many of the people in the ministry away. That's the background, Larry. Can you tell me about that, please?
Yeah, we were down in Gainesville, Florida, and I got a phone call from the leader of the Christian group in Atlanta at House of Judah, and he said, "Please come up." He goes, "It's the most amazing thing. I met people just like us, Jesus people, but they're 10 times advanced. They know the word so much more. They're just so great." So we came up, and it was the Children of God, and they had completely taken over that ministry. You called up one morning and tried to warn us, and they laughed at you and everything and hung up, and were making fun of you. But anyways, so that was the Children of God. I didn't feel comfortable about it. I didn't like them. I felt it was wrong. But I talked to my elder, and he told me to obey and to do what the Lord wants. The Lord showed him to do it. So I was 18 years old. I obeyed my elder. So that started an 8-year period of pure hell for my wife and I. I'd have to say probably the first 2 years, all the way to about 1973, in spite of the Children of God, we witnessed Jesus and won many souls that really came to Jesus. But about 1973, it totally changed into where, from memorizing the Bible and spending full time following Jesus, to rejecting the Bible and following the words of Moses David, who was supposed to be God's end time prophet. Anyways, I felt very uncomfortable about that. Now, I heard they got into some weird things like child molestation, pornography and stuff. We never knew anything of that. We just knew that they were getting tripped off and they weren't following the Bible anymore. Now,
Larry, let me stop you there. Did you travel to Texas, to the farm in Texas?
Yes, we did.
What was the name of that farm, that ranch?
TSC, Texas Soul Clinic Ranch.
Right. Who was the leader? Who owned that property?
A guy named Fred Jordan that had a TV ministry, Church in the Home at the time, on television on Sunday. He owned it, but he let David Berg, Moses David, and the Children of God stay there. But so that was a large indoctrination period. I never felt comfortable at all. Those whole 8 years. But to our credit, I mean the Lord's credit, they kicked us out. We weren't really part of the Children of God. Those whole 8 years, we were almost on the outside. Once in a while, when they needed something, they would let us in for a few months, or we had something they needed, or they didn't have anybody and I could run it. We were pretty much out. So we ended up going to Australia, where one of my sons was born, the one who passed away.
Australia?
And, excuse me?
Did you say Australia?
Yes, yes. So after a few years in the Children of God, no, first my wife and I, gosh, I missed this whole thing. We went to Mexico, and then we went to Puerto Rico. We were supposed to go to Brazil, and I was all excited to be a missionary, but they said I was a bad dude and didn't know the Lord well, so they punished me. Anyway, so we ended up in Mexico for a long time and Puerto Rico. Then we went to Australia, and then we went to the Philippines. And in the Philippines, it was it's a rough country. It's a poor country to be in. And when we were in the Philippines, the children of God was really moving away from the Bible towards the teachings of Moses, David. And I spoke up against it. And they locked me up in a room for 2 or 3 days, 110 degrees, no food, just a glass of water, and said, pray, you're demon possessed. Because I told them I still believe Jesus was God and I still believe the Bible, you know? And they said, you're an old bottle. God's trying to pour new wine in you and you won't let him. So I was demon possessed and I was locked in a room. I broke. I broke. I was overseas. We didn't have any money. My family was there. We had nothing. All we had was the group. I broke. And anyways, it wasn't too much longer than that where we left the group and came back to America. Now I have to say at this time, I hated Jesus. I hated God. I just hated Christianity with a passion. If somebody would bring up Jesus, I would just go, shut up, I don't want to hear about that crap. It's garbage.
You've been in the Philippines with the children of God, and you've run into trouble. You're starting to counter the leadership. So you come back. Now, how many children do you have? You've got Cheryl. How many kids are down there in the Philippines?
Well, we had 3 children when we were in the Philippines, and when we came back, she was 8 months pregnant. So we had a 4th child, and then a couple of years later, a 5th child. Now, when we came back from the Philippines, I was just like, I didn't know anything. I had a large family. I didn't have any Christian friends. I didn't know anybody. We were just lost in space. Fortunately, her mother took us in, and I started my 40-year quest. Now, for about 4 years, I was just bitter against God after we came back from overseas. But then I started to get hungry again, to know what life is all about. So I want to say that when I was young, and I had 2 prayers to meet my wife, but the other prayer was, I prayed it for months, I really want to know you, God. Well, I have to say, my whole life experience, I believe, was an answer, so I could really know him. I needed a lot of this to know him. So I started my quest in 1979 when we came back from the Philippines. And I started out with reading Dr. Dwayne Dyer. And he's a New Age philosopher that's a psychologist. And I like to read people like him because it filtered me from the deep Eastern religion where I got it filtered through them a little bit. So I studied him a lot. I studied Deepak Chopra for about 15 years a lot. I studied Shakti Gawain. She was the first one. She wrote a book called Creative Visualization about how you could create just by attracting, which is magic really, enchantment. And I didn't want to believe it, but it was endorsed by Oprah Winfrey. And I thought, well, this is a really nice lady everybody trusts. So I read her book, and so it started me on the path of trying to create by visualization, by the laws of attraction, all these things which so many people are doing, which when you read the word is really magic, enchantments, all kinds of it. But I didn't know. I was truly innocently stupid. I read so many philosophies. Carlos Castaneda's with Don Juan and the magic mushrooms and the magicians, and so many thousands of hippies and young people followed him during the era. I studied him so much, got nothing out of it. Gary Zukav, The Seed of the Soul, talked about the soul and reincarnation, past lives and all that. I studied him for a couple of years, nothing. I'd just be so frustrated, There's just so many of them. Neil Walsh with Conversations with God 1, 2, and 3. These were really New Age popular books that he sold probably millions of. I read those books and studied them. The first book was kind of okay, except that he had too many gods, and then he got real weird. Everybody I followed, Uh, I just can't even name them all. For 40 years, I studied. I would meditate and call up a spiritual guide like they would teach you to. I never got a spiritual guide. Nothing ever happened. But now I know the Lord was protecting me, because what would that spiritual guide have been? It would have been a spirit, but it wouldn't have been the Holy Spirit. So I'm so thankful that it never worked. It never worked. Anyways, as we know, we had a bad recession that just ended recently for us up here, really bad, whenever the whole economy crashed. And I have a business, and I was worried about my employees and my family. I didn't have a lot of extra money to take care of them. So what did I do? I knew the answer was spiritual, so I tried to find it spiritually, and I started going into deep Eastern philosophies to create. So there was a real popular book called The Secret, and I reread that book, The Secret, and I started doing some chants. And I found a guru online, and I never believed in gurus, and I was scared of them. But I found a guru online who reminded me of Jesus in a way. So I started to follow him. But needless to say, he wasn't the Lord, right? So one day I was really excited because I found this guy, and I drove out to my son's house, and I said, I want you to watch this guru. It's like I told you, Jesus was supposed to be. This guy's like him. So we watched this guru, and he started leading you into worship of the sun. And I said to my son, this is too Eastern religion-y for me. This is going too far. And he said, and anyways, he goes, did you know you're the only person that's watched this video? And I go, no, nobody watched it but us. But anyways, I went home that night, and I was getting ready to do some deep Kabbalic Eastern meditations to call on the name of God to create, all because I wanted to have more prosperity for my employees and family and extended groups of people I know. Because, like any business people, we dish out a lot, and I wanted more. So I was getting ready to pray, and I was starting to go into this deep. First, I was calling up Gum, the elephants, to protect me as I was. It's just all terrible. There, it was all demonic. Anyways, I didn't know, so I started to do these chants, and a voice shot through my head out of the blue, and said, "I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not have strange gods before me. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." Now, it wasn't an audible voice. It was in my head. This is not me. And I got really, really shook up. This kinds of things shot through my head, like, I never left you or forsook you. You left me. I always loved you. Didn't I say I left the 99 and went after the one? Well, in this instance, you're that one. This was 4 years ago in the fall.
4 years ago. 4 years ago, and that was just a little bit before Katie and I visited you in Oregon.
A year later, you came up.
Okay.
About a year and 2 months later.
Yeah, and
or 2 years and 2 months later, something like that. I think it was 2 years later you came up. Anyways, that night I said, well, okay, God, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And the voice said, don't worry, I'll bring someone right to your door. And Kent came to my door. Anyways, I want to go back to that night. That's the most important night in my life. I remember one night, a few months before that night, about 2 a.m, I ran out my driveway and I said, God, the God of Abraham, Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if you're real, please, is there some kind of truth? There's got to be more to life. There has to be more. The last thing I want to share is when I got bitter against God at the end of the Children of God, I was brought back to the day when I hardened my heart against God. And almost like slow motion, I went through step of the day when I finally said, screw you, God, and turned my back on him. Everything that happened, how I had a choice, and I blamed God. And I realized that night when I went through slow motion, how I made choices that I knew weren't the right ones because I wanted to maybe sin a little bit or try a little bit. And that night I said, God, how could you have let that happen to me all those years? This is the night when I felt he spoke to me in the garage. And I go, I just don't understand it. And the impression I got is you really wanted to know me. And with your personality and the way you are, this is what it took, you know? And anyways, I'm just so thankful. I just can't tell you. I was becoming a bitter man before that night. I would sit in my chair and go, I'm 60 something. I'm going to die. I hate life. I hate it, and I was just becoming bitter. But the Lord had mercy on me. And when I cried out, he was there. Thank you, Jesus.
All right, Larry. Now, your experience. I'm gonna do a little monologue here.
Okay.
Because I think it's important, because I think there's probably people who will watch this and identify with you. So many people have had bad experiences in and around churches and church groups and so on, like you had. It's not unusual that what happened to you happens to many people, and they become very confused. We've seen this. A lot of people in the Jesus People movement got caught up with all kinds of weird, crazy groups. And then they have a period where they completely walk away, but then God doesn't leave them alone. The good shepherd, like you said, comes after the sheep that got injured and fell into a ditch. And I think that's what happened to you. And I wanted so much to get your story because for these years, last couple of years, as I wanted other people to hear what you've said, I think it will help people. Now, we're going to pick up. I want to talk a little bit about your business, what you did, how you finally landed on your feet. You're sitting in a beautiful home there, out in a beautiful area of Oregon. Tell us how you got involved in the restaurant business.
Okay. After we came back from the Philippines and we were like kind of destitute, and my wife's mother took us into her home, I got a job as an insurance agent, and for some reason, the Lord blessed me. Now, I was really angry and confused, and who came into my life? A guy named Joe Barillo, the husband of his wife was a minister in a little Pentecostal church, and he became an insurance agent at that company. And for 2 years, I cried out to him almost every day, an hour or two, and just poured everything. And he just listened and listened for 2 years and helped me learn how to how to be a normal person, pay bills and work and stuff, and just loved me for 2 years, and then moved on. And then another guy popped in my life. He was a Roman Catholic, but he believed in Jesus. And he was my friend up till this day, and he helped me, and he doesn't know it, Nobody knew this because I had a strong outgoing personality. I was the life of the party, but I cried inside. They didn't know that, And so, but then anyways, I don't know how to say it. I wanted my family to be in a place where they could where they could work with their hands and experience life that way. I felt they were getting kind of spoiled where we were, because we were getting blessed so much. So we moved up to Oregon and bought a little restaurant, and we got cheated, and it went down, and I lost everything we saved and borrowed. But then somehow, I don't know how to explain this, but one day I was turned on my radio, and a voice came on the radio and said, you got to have timing. And then later I was driving in my car and turned on my radio, and that same song came on. I hadn't heard it before or since, but the reason that song is important is because I was trying to figure out, I was praying to the universal God whether I should get this restaurant or not. And that song is timing, and it was the right time. So all these years I prayed to universal God because I was mad at Jesus, but God was merciful and he heard me. So anyways, we got this restaurant after the first one we got cheated, And the Lord just blessed us. It's been 22 years, and we've made good money every year, and we were able to buy our home and to buy a bunch of rentals for our retirement. And He's just been so good, And I don't know anything. It was just all Him. It was just all His mercy, He just helped me and taught us and gave me such a wonderful wife that's always been there. The children of God hurt her so bad, and she's still positive and a loving person. One of my daughters adopted 2 children. My other son adopted 1 boy. Even though they didn't know Jesus, we taught them a universal God, and they grew up loving. But they all know, everybody I know has heard about that night in the garage when the Lord came to me. So everybody I've come into contact with ever since has heard this.
Now, Larry, let me ask you, thank you for that very much. Now, you're living in the home there. I know Cheryl's there. Are any of your kids with you now?
No, they're all grown, but they all live in
grown
town.
and gone, and nobody's come back home. So now let me ask you a couple more questions.
Yes.
When Katie and I visited you a few years ago, you weren't going to any church. I don't think you were.
No.
Now, are you now?
No, I'm not. The funny thing about it is when I prayed about, well, what should I do about a church? When I felt the voice, the Lord told me that somebody was going to come to my house when you came. He said, don't worry, I'll put a church next door to you. And we're in a shopping center, and it's unheard of. But Calvary Chapel Church moved to next door. And I've talked to them, but I guess it's just still because of the children of God. I just can't go sit in a church and live there. I just don't know, Plus, I'm totally disabled. But so, no, I don't go to church, but I go online. And I attend a lot of church services online.
Right.
And a lot of teaching. I spent 3 or 4 hours studying the Bible every day and online for the last 4 years.
Well, I'm glad you're having this opportunity, Larry, to tell your story. So many people have walked down the road that you were. It's always curious to me that at the same time God pours out His Holy Spirit in a mighty way to save people and do miracles, at the same time there's a demonic movement too. And we've all been touched by it. And one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on to see that you could go through hell literally and still come out being a follower of Jesus. That's a big deal. Now, tell us a little bit, do you have any plans for the future? What are you thinking about now for going forward?
Well, we're thinking of retiring soon. I'm 65. I'll be 66. But as far as the Lord's work goes, I just don't know. I'm hoping maybe something might open up from this, where somebody might say, share more with us or something. I was thinking of maybe writing a book, but I don't know if there's enough material really for a book. It might just be a tract, but I'm just open to the Lord. I don't know how much longer I'll live. I wanted to get this out. I desperately wanted to be able to share what happened to me, and now I have on a bigger scale. So all I can say is, Jesus, I'm here. And if there's any way, I can't tell you the years of studying philosophies, just the frustration of every Eastern religion, every foreign religion, all the Buddhism, all the Krishna consciousness, all that Krishnamurti, all these teachers I followed for 40 years, nothing. And then when the Lord rescued me, it's real, baby. It is real.
It's real, Larry. I agree with you.
I'm happy because I know I've got the truth. I know the truth. I know the truth. I always wanted to know it my whole life, and now I know it.
That's right. God. Yeah, you're right. It's really unimaginable and unexplainable what we go through, but you're living proof that God never gives up on us. Never gives up on us. never throws away the clay, we used to say. Never throws us away. Even when you'd think we have no use anymore, we've just gone too bad, God never stops loving us. That's
true.
That's one of the great things. So, well, there may be some projects come up, Larry. There may be some projects come up. You never know what God may do. But I would encourage you to write down your testimony. Maybe write some things. See what comes of it. You never know. And
Ken, I would just like to share one last thing is that I have a lot of notes here, and we only covered about 20% of it. The philosophies I followed, I hardly even mentioned hardly any of them, or a lot of the experiences I had, but I guess the important stuff got out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to say thank you to Cheryl, who helped put this together. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you for your daughter Patience, who's been on the phone with my wife and working things out, and that's been a big help. And I want to get up there one of these. Do you still own that restaurant?
Yes.
Katie and I want to get up there and go to your restaurant. You owe me a big dinner.
I sure do. I sure do.
Larry. Are you in touch with any of the people back in the days when you were in Marin County?
David Hoyt, I've been in touch with him somewhat.
Yeah.
He's pretty much the only one so far.
Now, let me tell you something you can get involved with. David and I and Scott McCarroll and John Konichko out in Columbia, South Carolina, we're beginning something that we used to do in the Jesus People movement, Larry, and that is the Jesus People Tract Society. You remember the days we would go on the street and hand out gospel tracts?
Of course I do.
We're going to do that. And Larry, I want to get you involved in that. I'm going to ask you to do this. Write some gospel tracts. Some of the lists of the people you mentioned you got into. Write some one-page tracts about that stuff. Okay. And we'll make it part of our Jesus People Tract Society. Larry, we got to say goodbye. We're past the time. I'm already going to have a major editing problem with our programs.
Okay. Just
all right, now, Larry.
One more guy who helped me, Dan Pauly, and that's it.
Larry, the Lord bless you and Cheryl and your family. All right.
All right.
This is the end of our talking with Larry Gottlieb, and be looking for Why We Are Christians. So long.